Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Coach Edge Show. I am Taylor Edge, and I'm super excited. I say that a lot, that I'm super excited about our guests, because I always am, because I love to share the people. I'm very intentional about the folks we bring on the show, because I think they bring so much value. But I'm really also thankful and honored by our guest today. I've been following him a long time on social media. I say from afar, and I think he's just got a ton of wisdom and practical advice. I love how he says perspectives, frameworks, and principles. Same thing we're about at Season Builder. So I really wanted to bring this guy on. And as I always do, I don't like to introduce my guests for what they do, but who they are. And just a couple of words that come to my mind about Alan are humble, available, consistent. Another word is better. Like, I think just even you're going to hear in this episode today that he is constantly striving to be better. Just so honored, so thankful that Alan Stein Jr. would join us on the Coach Edge Show. Alan, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my goodness, I'm equally excited and equally grateful and looking forward to a very fun conversation. So the pleasure's all mine.
Awesome. There may be a few people out there in the world maybe that have not heard of you and don't know much about you. So would you mind just sharing just a little background on you growing up? Where did you grow up? Kind of a little bit of childhood, a little bit of parents, and kind of where Alan came from.
Sure. Well, I'm fully aware that the overwhelming majority of people have never heard of me and aren't familiar with my work, and I'm totally okay with that. The goal is whoever we can reach during this fun conversation, hopefully a few of them will remember the things that we talked about. So that's what's most important to me. I actually grew up where I live now, which is a suburb of Washington, D.C. I live in Maryland, in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and grew up here in a wonderful family, two-parent household, and both of my parents were elementary educators. My mom was a first-grade teacher. My father was started as a teacher and then became a middle school principal. And then I had a younger brother, still do, younger brother as well. And I'm the only one that's still here. My parents retired and moved to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina 20 years ago. And my brother got married and moved to Jacksonville, Florida. He's now in St. Augustine, but he moved to Jacksonville 15 years ago. And I think the best way to describe my childhood was I was just always heavily attracted to anything where I could expend energy, which mostly revolved around sports. And I did just about every sport under the sun, even some unconventional sports like BMX biking and skateboarding and martial arts, but certainly basketball and football and soccer. But of all the things that I did, basketball always ended up winning out and being my favorite. I ended up having a fairly decent high school career and then played at Elon. It was Elon College at the time. It's now Elon University down in North Carolina. And while I was at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for the training side of the game, for strength and conditioning and fitness and nutrition and mindset. So when I graduated from Elon in the late 90s, I decided to become a basketball performance coach. And I was able to do that for just under 20 years before I made the pivot to what I'm doing currently, which is a corporate keynote speaker and author. And basketball is still a major pillar of my life to this day, still a burning passion of mine. And I'm very grateful that I've been able to build, not just make a living, but to build an extraordinary life around something I've been so passionate about.
Yeah. Man, thank you so much for sharing that. And I know that all those things in sports and in athletics and specifically basketball, they're so analogous to what we run into out there in the corporate world or entrepreneurial world or world in general, right? It's such a universal language. Awesome. Down south, we say sometimes like so-and-so is my middle name. Like I would say that change is my middle name. So what would you say if I ask you, Alan, other than your real middle name your mom and dad gave you, what's your middle name?
Love that's an incredibly insightful and innovative question. I'm trying to think of the traits that I'd like to believe that I most embody. And the one that just came to me immediately and will be spontaneous is consistent or consistency. Yeah. I actually believe that's one of a very small handful of superpowers I have. Is the ability to be relentlessly consistent about the things that matter most to me. I mean, certainly there's things in my life that I'm not consistent with because they don't matter. But I've always believed that consistency and then kind of an offshoot of that is discipline, are
Yes.
two non-negotiables, not just when it comes to high performance or productivity or success, but
Hmm.
when it comes to true fulfillment and happiness, and living a life of purpose. I think you need to have high self-discipline, and you need to be relentlessly consistent.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That was literally one of the words that I used to describe you when I introduced you. So, hey, you're doing a great job with Alan Consistent Stein Jr. How about
That sounds great.
that? So cool. So, what prompted me reaching out is I follow Alan on X, and he had a post that he had pinned actually to the top of his profile that were 48 frameworks, perspectives, and principles that he had learned over his 48 and a half. I like how you put in a half years. I was so intrigued by it because it's very aligned, like I said earlier, with who I am, what I try to teach and coach and mentor for young people. And I just thought it would be amazing to let me pick a few of these out and have him unpack it. So that's where this conversation started. I said he was available, reached out to him on X, and hey, would you mind coming on board and share? And he said, absolutely, send me an email. So that's where we're going to go with this conversation. So before I throw the first one out, I want to give one to you that I think about you, and it's something I share a lot. Be somebody that makes everybody feel like a somebody. I feel
Oh,
like
I
you
love
do
that.
that.
Thank you.
I really feel like you do that. I loved Ed Milet, and I heard your conversation with him, a number of months ago, and he's such a genuine and authentic guy, and just you guys just were so complimentary, and just the way you treated me, and the way I see you treat a lot of people. That if you want to be somebody that makes everybody be a somebody, that's you. So I just want to tell you that.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and I appreciate that, and that's received with the warmth and gratitude in which it was shared. And really, I can think back to countless people that have made me feel like a somebody, even at times where maybe I felt like I was a nobody. So a
Yeah,
lot of these uh, principles and perspectives and things that we're going to talk about are things that have been modeled for me by
yeah.
people that have had a major impact and influence over my life. So anytime I can pay that forward and make someone else feel the way that someone else made me feel, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just a cherry on top.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, let's jump right in. Like I say, there were 48 of them. We're not going to talk about all 48, but I picked out some ones that I really wanted you to share on. And the first one, it wasn't in the list, but it's a good friend of mine. He's actually done a talk based on your talk, and it was don't get bored with the basics. I know that's one of your key messages that you share. Just in your own words, just briefly, what does that mean? What is don't be get bored with the basics, and how does that
Well,
helpful?
it was actually a phrase that the late great Kobe Bryant shared with me back in 2007 when I had a chance to watch one of his early morning private workouts. I was part of the staff at Nike for Kobe Bryant Skills Academy, and
Okay.
I remember at the time believing that Kobe was the best player in the world. And when
Mm-hmm.
I got to watch one of his individual private workouts, I remember as a young coach being very surprised at the simplicity of what he was doing. He was just drilling down on a series of basic fundamental moves. Now, he was doing everything with unbelievable precision and
Mm-hmm.
unbelievable effort and focus. But the actual, semantics of what he was doing was rather basic. And that really
Yeah.
surprised me. I expected to see a player of his stature doing things with a little more sexiness and sizzle to him. And
Yeah.
when I asked about, you know, why a player at his level was doing such basic drills, he said something to me that really changed my perspective forever. He said, well, the reason I'm the best player in the world is because I never get bored with the basics. And
Mm-hmm.
ever since that moment he said that to me, that kind of became my foundational mantra for how I approach everything in my life. As you can see, anyone that's watching this visually, you can see the sign above my head, says success simplified. I think too many times we get caught up in making things unnecessarily complex. And
Yes.
I believe complexity undermines execution. That if you
Mm-hmm.
want to get good at anything and you want to see results in anything, you need to untether from the unnecessarily complex and just focus on the basics, focus on the fundamentals, and work towards mastery of those. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to run a better business or get yourself in better physical shape or have a better marriage. Figure out what are the basic building blocks to being successful in those endeavors and then work towards mastery during the unseen hours of those components. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, every year that I get older, it's not that I'm trying to add more tools to my toolbox. I'm trying
Right.
to let go of all of the things that no longer serve me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is one of your basics in your personal life?
Well, the foundational one is to be fully present, to
There
whoever
you
you're
go.
with, be with them. Whatever you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, be fully present. And I'll make this disclaimer, and even with the whole list of 48 that I had shared, that with all of these things, including the ability to be present, I'm not coming from a place of mastery. Like
Right.
these are still things that I find challenging, still things I'm working on, still things I'm trying to move forward and improve. But what I can say with a huge smile and a tremendous amount of pride is every single thing on that list, I'm doing better today more consistently than I've done at any other previous time in my life. And being present is no different. I'm proud to say that I am more present more often today than at any previous time in my life. But I'm far from present every moment of every day. I mean, I'm not
Right.
a Tibetan monk by any means, but I'm very proud of the direction at which I'm going. So the reason I
Amen.
share that is when I'm with my kids, I try and be with my kids. I try not to be thinking about work or playing on my phone. I try to be fully present. Right now, I'm fully present with you and thus your audience, because the only thing that matters to me in this moment is that you and I have a fun, insightful, and playful, and hopefully helpful conversation. I'm
Yes.
not worried
Yes.
about anything else. Now, when our conversation is over, then I'll shift my gears and I'll be fully present for the next thing that's on my
Mm-hmm.
schedule. But to me, the cornerstone is always being in the present moment. Now, one caveat to that, I do believe we should learn from the past, and I do believe we should prepare for the future,
Mm-hmm.
but we shouldn't live in either one of those places. I don't believe you
Yeah.
should live in the past or try to live in the future. Not that you could anyway, but linguistically speaking, because I
Yeah.
think all the magic of the world is in the present moment. So be diligent enough to learn from previous experiences and mistakes and missteps. Make sure you're prepared for things that most likely will come, but don't worry about living in either one of those things. Be fully invested with all of your faculties in the present.
Great basic. I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. So we are going to take now one from the list, and it happens to be number 2. And I'm going to read it here. Vulnerability is a prerequisite to immeasurable strength. I agree with that one too. When did you learn that? Do you remember who you learned it from, and how has it played a role in your life?
Well, it's actually still one that I'm continuing to learn. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
at the
Mm-hmm.
risk of sounding like a broken record, I have the ability to be more vulnerable today than I've ever been before, both personally and professionally, individually, organizationally. But I
Mm-hmm.
still have room to grow. There are
Yeah.
still some deep seated fears and insecurities that I still
Mm-hmm.
harbor that are preventing me from completely being uninhibited and vulnerable. And, I'm of the belief that the reason vulnerability is the prerequisite to strength was imagine if you and I were going to be like like in the Roman Empire times, you and I are getting ready to be in
Okay.
a joust, and
Okay.
you are covered head to toe in armor and fully protected. And I'm going to go out there and I'm standing there just in my bathing suit. Like, I'm a tough son of a gun. I'm willing to go into a joust with you, and I have no protection whatsoever. It is just me. I'm going to be raw and I'm going to be there, and to me, vulnerability is having the self-awareness to acknowledge kind of the side of things that we usually prefer not to acknowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vulnerability
Yeah.
is being in touch with your fears, being in touch with your insecurities, being in touch with the ways where you feel less than,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to have the courage and the strength to dissect those things, lean into them, and when appropriate, be able to share them with others,
Yeah.
and I think especially when you're looking to have a very deep connected relationship. And it doesn't matter if it's a personal, intimate relationship, um,
Mm-hmm.
or even like the relationship I have with my children. One
Yeah.
of the things I try to model for my 3 children is the ability to be vulnerable. I try and be
Mm-hmm.
very open and honest with my kids about how I'm feeling, about, what it is that I'm feeling and how I'm thinking, and letting them know that that's okay. And being able to share your emotions in an appropriate way, and in an effective way, but still have the regulation skill sets to not let your emotions overrun you. So I'll share with my children when I'm sad or I'm feeling depressed or I'm upset. I think it's important for them to understand that as human beings, we're going to feel and experience all of those human emotions, and that being able to own them and acknowledge them and work through them, i.e., being vulnerable, is certainly a sign of strength.
Yeah, man, that's great. That is so good. All right, another one that I picked from the list was and stress. I hear that word all the time. I work with young people, college students, and young adults, and about every discussion I have, the word stress comes up. It says stress is the desire for things to be different than they are in the present moment. That's the quote. And then you also wrote with it that stress is not caused by circumstances or and events. It's caused by resisting them. Accept what is. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I first learned this concept from Eckhart Tolle, who, for lack of a better term, is kind of a modern day philosopher. And I'm a big fan.
I was going to ask you if you read Power of Now, because when you said being present, Power of Now was in my mind when you were talking about that.
100%. And I feel so aligned and have so much congruency with Eckhart's perspective. And it just kind of hit me, because I would say for the first 4 decades of my life, I ascribed to the notion that many people do, that stress is actually caused by external events. That, stress is caused by sitting in traffic. Stress is caused by a fight with your spouse. Stress is caused because your boss makes you stay late, whatever the case may be. And through Eckhart's enlightening definition, it made me realize that those things are all inherently neutral. They just are what they are. Yeah. The stress only surfaces when we resist those things. When we realize that those aren't our preference. When you're just sitting in traffic, there's nothing positive or negative about sitting in traffic until you choose to assign an emotion or a label to it. And if you choose to look at traffic as a negative thing, then traffic's going to make you feel stressed out. And that doesn't mean that any of us would have a preference. Like, I would not prefer to be in a fight with a spouse. I'd prefer my boss doesn't make me come in extra. I'd prefer not to sit in traffic. Sure. So stress is really determined by how you choose to behave when your preferences aren't met. When things don't turn out the way you'd like, or things aren't going the way that you'd prefer, how do you let that affect you? And if you let circumstances and events dictate how you're feeling, then ultimately stress is going to go up. So once again, this is an area where I've made improvement, far from mastery, but I've made improvement. My overall level of day-to-day stress has gone down significantly, because I've learned to accept that what's happening is what's happening, and I just need to be thoughtful about my response to what's happening. And I choose, most of the time, a non-stressful response.
Yeah. I love that. One of the things I try to share too is I always have a choice. So it so aligns with what you just said, right? You always have a choice. No, I don't have a choice. Yes, you do. You may not like the consequences of either one of those choices, but you have a choice. And I love what you said about that. You choose the story that you tell about the external impacts on your life. And so, if everybody just wants to turn off and implement that right now, do that.
Yes. And when I mention acceptance, just for additional clarity, it's literally the acceptance that this is reality at the moment. I'm not saying that if you were to see an injustice, that you just accept that injustice is going on. No, I believe in action. I believe in being proactive. I believe in thoughtful responses. I'm just saying that, if right now, if it's raining outside, all the wishing, hoping, and worrying ain't going to change the weather. It's raining. And I just have to accept that it's raining, and then I need to come up with a thoughtful response. So if I was planning to go outside for a run and now it's raining, and I can either choose to run in the rain, or I can choose to go get on the treadmill, or I can choose to take a day off and run tomorrow. But any of those are my choices. Sitting around and being upset or angry or stressed that it's raining isn't going to do anything to fix the issue. So to me, it's a level of acceptance with reality, even if you don't like what the reality is, and then being very intentional and thoughtful in a response.
Thanks for that additional clarity, because we're aligned with that. Accept what it is. Now what? Right? Yes. Let's accept it. And now what? Yeah, great. Okay, what's another one? Oh, I love this one. This is one I saw in Ted Lasso. I don't know how you feel about Ted Lasso. I'm a big Ted
Love
Lasso guy.
Ted Lasso.
Yeah. So this one came from him, and or I've heard something similar. It says, "Be curious, not judgmental. Want a better life? Ask better questions." So I love that too. Just where did you learn that? Why did that one make the list? What are your thoughts on that one?
I believe that one was implanted in me well before Ted Lasso, and
I
that
bet
was
it was.
one of the things I loved about that show was so many of the through lines and lessons kind of double clicked on things that I was already trying to incorporate in my life. And I, I know they claim that show is over, but I still think in a year or two they're going to bring it back. That's you got my hot take right here. But
Okay, it's too good not to.
yeah. So one of the things I figured out in life, and this again is because I did it the other way before. I found that I was an incredibly judgmental person. When people would say or do things, I was constantly judging their behavior or judging their actions. And then often an offshoot of judging them was then I would start to make assumptions about them. So I see someone doesn't return their shopping cart properly. They just leave it in the parking lot. And I make a judgment about who that person is and why they did that. And then I just make assumptions about every, other aspect of their life. And first and foremost, that type of mentality is it's a turnoff. It's, it reeks with being self-righteous. And that's not the type of person that I want to be. So when I found myself kind of naturally defaulting to being very judgmental and making a lot of assumptions, I tried to figure out, well, what's the inverse of that? And the opposite of that is to lean in with curiosity and fascination and to be completely open and to ask lots of questions and to not assume that you know what someone else is going through or what someone else knows or what someone else's experience is. Now, I adamantly believe we should leave places better than we found them, which means when you're done with your shopping cart, part of my operating system is I go put it back in the shopping cart corral where it's supposed to go. But I have to acknowledge, just because that's how I choose to navigate my life doesn't mean that everybody else has to do the same. Everyone else is free to make their own, decisions and choices. And I need to be much more of a compassionate, empathetic, tolerant person. And all of those things skew towards being more curious and fascinated. Where I really see this playing out in real time today is in the divisive culture that we live in, especially from a political standpoint. I mean,
totally
we're in the throes of an election year, and I find that people on either side of the aisle can be very judgmental and make so many assumptions about the other group, whereas I find it to be much more of an effective connective tissue to lean in and be curious. You could bring up any political issue, and if you and I happen to have a difference of opinion, instead of me judging you for why you think what you think, I want to learn more about why you think what you think. I'd love to learn why you have this stance on this issue, or what experiences you've had that have led you to believe that this is, a better approach. And I found that when you do lean in with curiosity and fascination, you can connect with people. And it doesn't mean you have to agree with them. There's nothing wrong with civil disagreement. That is completely fine. Yeah. But I think your world expands and opens up tenfold when you don't assume you know the answer to everything and you get curious. And I've always believed in being a big question asker. And I do think the quality of your life heavily hinges on not only the quality of the questions you ask, but of the quality of the people that you ask them of.
Mm-hmm. True. Hey, let's help a few people right now, because I think sometimes, especially young people that I work with, they want to do that. They believe in that, but they're so timid. They don't even know how to ask questions. They don't even know how to frame it, how to approach it. So let's just take you can pick any topic that maybe has two sides of it. And so how would you recommend someone enter into, how do you be curious? How do you enter into that inquisitive conversation that disarms, any of the tension or at least tries to lower it? I don't know if it disarms it, but what are some of your ideas on how people can enter into some curious conversations?
Well, one is just prefacing it with the fact of, I actually think, especially in the divisive world we live in, there's a lot more commonality than we give credit for. I
Totally
mean,
agree.
really, regardless of what side of the fence you're on any issue politically, I do think almost everyone wants the same thing. You know,
Yeah.
they want to live happy, healthy lives with people that they care about. They want to have the ability to do work that they're passionate about and that makes a contribution. You know, many people want to raise a family and enjoy being a part of the community. You know, most of these things we all want. Now, where there tends to be some divide is what are the best policies and procedures for achieving that. But we all
Yeah.
want the same thing. So at the end of the day, I think of all the types of questions that we can ask, the ones that start with why are the most effective and efficient ones. So, you know, why do you feel this would be the most effective approach to take? Or, you know, why do you believe that this would be something that would be advantageous for what we're trying to do? You know, what types of things in your past or what experiences have you had that make you feel this way? I mean, on some level, I'm always surprised that people think we should all look and think and act the same. Whereas, you know, even just within our country, where you were raised geographically is going to have a major impact on how you see the world. Who you were raised by is going to have an impact on who and how you see the world. You know, when you were raised,
Yeah.
you know, you're telling me that a 20-year-old should have the same life perspective as an 80-year-old. You know, somebody that grew up in Huntsville, Alabama is going to have the exact same worldview as someone that grew up on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. Like, no, of course not. We all have very, very biased experiences and lenses at which we see the world. And I think that's a good thing. You know, ultimately, what I believe that can promote is diversity. And I know we talk about diversity a lot, but I'm actually talking about diversity of thought. You know, I know you and I are roughly the same age, but if you grew up in Huntsville, Alabama, and I grew up in Washington, D.C., there's going to be some giant differences on how we view the world and the experiences we've had. And that diversity should be welcomed. It should be championed. I should try to learn as much as I can from you, you know, growing up in the South and the way that you grew up and all of the things that went around that, and then be able to be open enough to share the same things in my life. And then we can kind of come together. So for me, the best thing to do is ask the questions of why. And if you do it with sincerity and compassion, then you will disarm the other person, because you're not being accusatory. You're not making someone justify. You're literally saying, hey, I would love to see the world through your lens. You know, we are both educated, rather intelligent human beings, and yet you and I have very opposing viewpoints on this one issue. I'm fascinated by that. I'm so curious to how two people roughly the same age could view this issue so differently. And I would love to learn more about why you feel the way that you feel. And if you're open to it, I'm happy to share why I feel the way I feel. And I think if we could have more civil discourse like that, most of these issues would just start to dissipate.
I totally agree. I totally agree. No, that's great advice, and I love how you said it. It's all in, tone makes a big difference, right? With humility and empathy. Hey, why do you? I'm so curious. You know, preface. You know, why? What has made you have such strong beliefs about that? I mean, let's just throw some elephants in the room. I mean, is it abortion? You know, is it is it homosexuality? Like, can we come and start to understand around those? And so, yeah, I always say this: if you didn't hear anything else, listen to that. But there's too many things I want you to listen to, so I don't want it just to be this one, but that's a good one.
No, and like I said too, and it's okay at the end of that discourse to still believe different things and have different opinions. This isn't about you having to concede and believe what someone else believes, or it's not about trying to force them to believe what you believe. It's just about not judging or making assumptions, and then asking insightful and sometimes difficult questions just to get a better understanding of it. You know, for me personally, while we're in this kind of election cycle right now, I intentionally go out of my way to watch different sources that are heavily leaning on either side. And the conclusion I keep coming to is there is so much misinformation going in both directions. One side, what they think the other side thinks is completely misinformed. And then
Yeah.
the other side is doing the exact same thing. They're thinking, how could you like this person or like this thing? And it is so misinformed. And that misinformation really stems from being judgmental and making assumptions instead of really peeling back the layers and then, asking questions. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with saying with full sincerity and respect, it's okay for us to agree to disagree on this, whatever this issue is. I appreciate you caring enough to share with me why you believe what you believe. And you have every right to believe what you believe. See, the mere arrogance of thinking everyone should believe what I believe and everyone should think what I think is unbelievable to me. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody, if you believe that you have the right to have freedom of thought and freedom of choice and freedom of belief, then at the very end, then you have to respect that other people have the same.
Yeah, it's like you have that right. Oh, but nobody else does
Right.
because they're wrong.
It's a very arrogant point of view. Yeah.
Yeah, it does not align with humility. And again, that's another tries to be, as you said, I'm trying to be a humble. I'm trying to live a life of humility. And I think curiosity is the cousin of humility. So good. Love that one, man. I cannot wait to talk about this one. Another big hot topic that gets talked about a lot is actually right after that. People pleasing and perfectionism are masks for insecurity, and neither is attainable. Man, we're starting to touch on insecurity. You talked about it just a few moments ago, but yeah, people pleasing and perfectionism. I work with a lot of athletes, and people pleasing is pretty general, but perfectionism is pretty common for these college athletes. Talk to me a little bit about those two unattainable dreams.
For sure. And I'll just share, from my own experiences in the first person. I think, and I don't think this is unique to me, I think on some level, the root of almost every insecurity that anybody has is this belief that we're not enough, that I'm not enough. And you can put that in whatever context you want. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not good enough, whatever it may be. And two that I used to use to compensate was trying to please others, being a people pleaser, and trying to be a perfectionist. And these weren't things that I was consciously thinking of.
Right.
This was in my unconscious wiring. It was somehow I figured out, well, if I do everything perfectly, then I will be enough. Then people will love me, and I'll be good enough. People will care about me, but I've got to make sure that everything is perfect. And same thing with the people pleasing. Well, I don't want to say no, because then if I say no, then maybe they won't like me, and them not liking me stirs up that trigger of having that insecurity that I'm not enough. So, I don't think at their root, the desire for excellence and the desire to put your best foot forward, I think is a noble one. The desire to be conscious of other people's feelings and want to be kind and treat other people like at face value, those things are very noble.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I don't believe there is any such thing as perfection, especially when we're talking about our day-to-day lives. I mean, so throw that ideal out the window. Just acknowledge that as mere mortals and as human beings, all of us are flawed. All of us are fallible. All of us are going to occasionally say or do things that, aren't the best representation of the person that we're trying to become. And just give yourself some grace and space and some compassion to be less than perfect. Just know that, no matter what you do, I mean, I've written 2 books and I'm proud of both of those books. And I put my heart and soul into both of those books. Neither one of those books is anywhere close to perfect. And that's okay.
Yeah, right.
They were the best I could do at that time with the information I had, and I'm okay with that. And same thing with people pleasing. You will never be able to please all of the people all of the time. I mean,
that's right.
I also ascribe to, and I believe it's on that list as well, when you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else just by default. Me saying yes to be with you and record during this hour means I am literally saying no to every other thing I could have done during this hour. Now, I'm great with that decision and that trade, but that's the inherent flaw of people pleasing. By saying yes to please someone, you're going to displease someone else. And what I found was many times in my attempt to please others, the person I was displeasing was myself. That I
Yes.
wasn't putting boundaries up, to protect myself and my self-care and so forth. So when you're always trying to please everyone else, many times you empty out your own bucket and you don't take care of yourself. So for me, through firsthand experience, I still do the best I can to try to
Yeah.
be kind and considerate and serve others. I do the best I can to put everything I put out in this world with my signature on it to have a certain level of excellence. But I no longer worry about being perfect, and I no longer worry about pleasing everybody.
Yeah, I think it loops back around and it connects with something you said earlier about accepting what is. Because
Yes.
I think perfectionism too goes along with you're not willing to accept reality, and so you push that to the side and strive for again some end of the rope that's about always about that far away or that far
Yes.
away.
Well said. And to some level, perfectionism always deals with the external. And an
Mm,
offshoot of that
mm,
perfectionism is, all right, if I can get my body in perfect shape and have washboard abs, well, then I'll be happy and feel good about myself. If I can do a perfect job with this proposal, then maybe it will get me that raise. And when I get that raise, then I will be able to be happy. And it's always kind of just pushing the cart down a little bit further. When in reality, having perfect abs or getting the job promotion is not what's going to make you happy.
mm,
There's nothing wrong with striving for either of those things. But if
right.
you're under this belief that if I can make this thing perfect, then I will be happy, it's fool's gold, or at least it was for me, because then even when you attain those certain levels of temporary perfection, it's
Yeah.
incredibly short lived and it's never as fulfilling as you had hoped it would be.
Right, right. Yep, so well said. I heard a guy say one time, his name was Les Perry. I was at a marriage retreat or marriage conference. He tells this story about in the Tom Cruise movie, Any Given Sunday, maybe. Is that I can't remember. Uh, Show Me the Money.
Oh yeah,
I'm
Jerry
butchering this.
Maguire.
Jerry Maguire, good, yeah, the other the other football movie,
Yeah.
but yeah. So Jerry Maguire, and he busts in and he tells his Renee Zellweger, I think is his wife in the movie, and this sappy movie. He said, you complete me, and it's a very emotional, hey, yeah, oh yeah. But Les Parrott said the problem is that when you look for another person to complete you, they will never. He said two halves don't make a whole, two wholes make a whole. And I thought
Yes.
that was a very interesting. I'd never heard that before, but like, yeah, become happy with yourself, right? Rather than trying to figure out what's going to make you happy. Learn how to accept yourself and be happy without all of that stuff. And then it's amazing how much of that stuff comes back in.
Yeah, well said. I mean, to take that a step further, if I'm going to live under the assertion that you complete me, then that means by default, without you, I am incomplete. And which means
Yes.
without you, I am broken. Without you, I'm not enough. Without you, and that's not a very strong foundation to start from. It needs
No.
to be, I am complete and I am the best version of myself and you are as well. And now let's just see if we can make some magic together. But yeah,
Yes.
you're basically giving your power away with a statement like "you complete me."
Yes, yes, totally agree. Totally agree. Um, Love for you to talk about. Next topic is accountability. It's number 18 on the list. I feel like I'm Casey Kasem's top
Yeah, you
30
sound great.
countdown. You and I know what that is, but
I do.
okay,
I
number
love it.
18. Accountability is a gift. Be open to accepting it, and I love this. Care enough to give it. We talk a little bit about the importance of accountability, and let's do a little equipping moment again too. How are some effective ways to give it?
Well, I believe holding someone accountable is something you do for them. It's not something you do to them.
To them? Yeah, good
Holding
point.
someone accountable is a gift because, in essence, when you hold someone accountable to a high standard of excellence, and it doesn't matter if it's parent to child or coach to player or teacher to student, when you hold someone highly accountable to a high standard of excellence, in
Yeah.
essence, what you're saying is, look, I care so much about you that I'm not going to let you get away with doing less than you're capable of. I care so much about you. I'm not going to let you violate one of your core values. I care
Mm-hmm.
so much about you. I'm not going to let you show up and give a poor effort or have a bad attitude. So we inherently all know that we want to be around people that hold us to that very high standard. Just many times in the moment, it feels like it's something they're doing to us instead of something for us. So if you can just constantly remember, when someone holds you accountable, they care about you. Like, that's an expression of
Yes.
love, and we should want to insulate ourselves with
Yes.
as many of those people as we can. And it does, especially on a team, if you're trying to create a high
Mm-hmm.
performance environment, you need to be able to give and receive accountability. When someone holds you accountable, you need to be able to take a deep breath and say, hey, Taylor's doing this because he cares about me. Taylor is trying to give me a gift right now, and I want to receive that gift. And once again, I might disagree with your feedback or your
Mm-hmm.
whatever your evaluation is, but I need to know that it's coming from a genuine place. That you're only telling me this because you want me to be better, and I should welcome that. And then at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, I should care enough about you and care enough about our team that I'm going to be just as open and honest when maybe you fall a little bit short of our
Mm-hmm.
standards, and I'm going to be honest and truthful and compassionate to you. So when everybody on the team is open to giving and receiving honest feedback and holding each other accountable, then you've got something really special.
You've had a ton of experience in college and professional basketball specifically, but I know many other sports. What has been one of the best examples? I mean, or it could have even been in a high school. I know you're a high school coach for a while, and so what team? Is there an example of a team that really modeled what you just said? Like there was this culture of what I'll call positive accountability, gift giving accountability. Have you? You may not have, but I'm just curious. Have you ever seen that really modeled well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and there's a countless number of examples of that. And that was always kind of the fabric of the culture. I mean,
Hmm.
really, if we're going to break it down, every
Yeah.
team needs to have, a vision or a mission or a goal, the ultimate
Hmm.
North Star
Hmm.
that they're trying to pursue. And then
Yeah.
they need to create and co-create a series of standards that if they live to these standards consistently, it gives them the best opportunity to reach that goal. And then
Yeah.
how do we hold each other accountable to those standards? So if one of our standards is going to be that we are always 5 minutes early for
Hmm.
practices, for team meetings, for games, whatever it may be, that's a standard we've all agreed that we're going to live up to. Well, when someone's not 5 minutes early, we need to care enough about them to hold them accountable to that and to let them know, hey, you just violated a standard that all of us had agreed is important to achieving what we're trying to achieve, and we're not going to let you do that. We're not going to let you slide
Hmm.
and violate that standard. That's the
Yeah.
essence of accountability. So the most important part is to just keep remembering the intention of accountability is
Hmm.
one of love. It's one of compassion. It means that you care.
Yes, I think you said another very important thing. So, if we've got other folks, coaches, players listening to this and watching this today, is you talked about standards. I think so many other times we don't have standards, we have expectations, and we never communicate those expectations, whether it's coach to player, player to player, and then all of a sudden we want to hold someone accountable, but it's based on to our an uncommunicated expectation, and a lot of times that's where it blows up. So I love that you talked about how we've got to have mutually communicated standards. Would you agree with that?
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that you brought that up because an example that I use on stage a lot is I had my kids over for dinner. And for context, I have 14-year-old twin sons and a
Hmm.
12-year-old daughter. And this was a couple
Okay.
of years ago. I think my son Luke was 12 at the time. And I
Okay.
asked my son Luke to clean the table after dinner. And he just quickly grabbed the plates and the utensils and the glasses and he threw them in the sink and he went to his room and he started playing on his phone. And I found myself a little frustrated because
Hmm.
I'm kind of old school. That's not how I define cleaning the table.
That's right.
I define cleaning the table as carefully picking up the glasses and the utensils and the plates, going over to the sink, rinsing them off, wiping them off with a sponge, lining them up very neatly in the dishwasher, and then taking a Clorox wipe and wipe the table off. And if you knock any crumbs on the ground, you sweep them up.
Sweep them up.
Well, right before I was going to get upset at Luke, it finally hit me. To your point earlier, see, I didn't clearly communicate my definition of cleaning the table. I didn't clearly communicate or articulate my expectation of what it means to clean the table. I left it completely ambiguous. I left it up to Luke. And for anyone watching or listening that has a 12-year-old son, you'll probably agree that the way Luke cleaned the table is perfectly in alignment with how a 12-year-old sees the world. He thought he did exactly what I asked him to do. And because I was so vague, he did. Vague expectations will get you vague results. So
there you go.
I ended up bringing all three kids out and explaining to them exactly what I meant when I said clean the table. Say, hey, this is the standard. This is the level of expectation that I have. And it's never been a problem since, because now they know definitively what I mean. So to your point, and I'm so glad you brought that up, it's up to us to communicate exactly what that standard of excellence is. So you can't hold someone accountable to something they're unaware of. You can't hold someone accountable to something they're oblivious to. That's not fair. That's why you need to be able to say, here are our collective standards. Does everyone agree and understand that these are the standards that we are committing to live by on and off the court? And once everyone understands that, then do you understand if you were to fall short to any of these standards or the expectations that we've laid out, we're going to hold each other accountable. And we're going to do it because we care about each other. This isn't about trying to be, mean or hard. Like, this is about caring and about love. And if you can express it in that regard, then people want to live up to the standard. People want to exceed expectations.
They do. They do. Man, so well said. So well said. Thank you so much for sharing that. Man, I want to be really respectful of your time. I can't tell you again how much I appreciate you being present, taking the time, you making me feel like a somebody. We had, just let everybody know, Alan and I have never met in person. Maybe we will one day, but we're over the computer. So as we wrap up, there were a lot on that list. Was there anything, or one last parting gift that you would like to give us, something I didn't mention or something that's on your heart that you'd love to share with our listeners?
Well, if memory serves, I don't know if it's on the list. If it's not, then make it number 49. But kind of the mantra that I try and live by is just leave every place better than you found it. And place can mean physical environment, but it also means every interaction. Every time you interact with another human being, try to make an emotional deposit and leave that person just a little bit better than you found them. And that could be something as simple as sharing a 10-second elevator ride with someone, but can you smile and say good morning? Like, can you just take a moment to give an emotional deposit? So for me, it's about leaving every place better than you found it. But I don't just mean the physical environment. I mean every single interaction you have with someone. And, if you can navigate your day, you're kind and thoughtful and courteous to the person checking you out at Target, to the waiter, when you go grab lunch, like whoever it may be, take every opportunity you can to leave an emotional deposit and leave every place just a little better than you found it.
Well, you have certainly left the Coach Ed Show better than you found it today. And I just so appreciate you. And hey, tell us, where can we find out? Where can our listeners find out a little bit more about you? Socials, website, where can we find out more about Alan?
Sure. Well, this was very delightful. I had a blast doing it. Too bad we only got to like 4 or 5 out of the 48, but I guess that leaves us some stuff to talk about in the future.
That's right.
My website is alansteinjr.com. That's where I have information on all of my speaking programs, both in person and virtual. I'm very easily found and accessible on social media.
Yes, you are.
Just at Alan Stein Jr. on Instagram, on X, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn. If anyone wants to ask a question or share a story, just shoot me a DM on any of those. I'm very good about getting back. And then I have 2 books, Raise Your Game and Sustain Your Game, both of which can be found on Amazon or Audible, or wherever you like to get your books and your audiobooks.
Awesome. Awesome. I encourage everybody to run out, give Alan a follow. You will not be sorry. He's very consistent with his principles there. And I just thank you so much, Alan, for being on the Coach Ed Show.
This was so much fun. Thank you.